There's a moment when pain stops being emotional and becomes strategic. That's where I was. Not heartbroken, not screaming, not begging. Planning. They believed they were manipulating me. They believed Laura was their access point. They believed I was distracted by jealousy. What they didn't understand was that I build systems for a living, and systems can be reversed. The international expansion model was my crown jewel. Months of work, advanced distribution mapping, predictive AI-based routing logic. If implemented correctly, it would put my firm 10 years ahead of competitors. If stolen, it could be catastrophic. So, I created a version. Not fake, not obvious, but flawed, subtly, strategically. The kind of flaw that wouldn't show up in spreadsheets, but would implode during large-scale execution. Incorrect long-term scalability assumptions, hidden cost multipliers triggered at high volume, tiny architectural miscalculations that would only surface once millions were already invested. To the untrained eye, it looked revolutionary. To someone greedy, irresistible. I uploaded it to my secured project folder, the same one Laura had accessed before. And then I waited. That night, I told Laura something carefully constructed. "I'm finalizing the international expansion model tomorrow," I said, casually over dinner. Her fork paused midair. "Oh?" "Yeah, it's bigger than the retail chain project. If this lands, we're set for life." I watched her face carefully. She tried to mask it, but excitement flickered. Not pride, opportunity. "I'm happy for you," she said softly. "Of course you are." After dinner, I went into my office and left the laptop open. Not obviously, just enough. Then I went upstairs and waited. At 11:47 p.m., I heard it. The soft click of my office door. Footsteps. Silence. Then typing. I didn't move, didn't breathe. 20 minutes later, she came upstairs, slid into bed, careful not to wake me. But I was wide awake, and something inside me hardened permanently. The next morning, I checked the system logs. File accessed. Copied. External drive connected. Timestamp, 12:03 a.m. There it was. Proof. Not suspicion, not jealousy. Fact. She was still feeding them, even after hearing the recording, even after knowing she was disposable. That realization hurt more than the affair ever did. 3 days later, the forensic accountant called again. "There's a large incoming transfer to her separate account," he said. "How much?" $75,000. Phase 2 payment. They had taken the bait. I leaned back in my chair and smiled for the first time in weeks. It wasn't joy, it was inevitability. 2 weeks later, industry news broke. Henderson and Cole announced a groundbreaking international distribution expansion initiative. Public presentation, press release, investor enthusiasm. They showcased strategic models, visual diagrams, projected growth charts. And as I watched the live stream from my office, I saw my work, my structure, my language. Rebranded, repackaged, claimed. Daniel Cole stood confidently at the podium. "This model positions us at the forefront of global logistics innovation." Investors applauded. Stock prices rose. Ethan stood off to the side, smiling, victorious. Laura watched the stream from the kitchen, silent, nervous, because she didn't know what I had done. It didn't happen immediately. Systems like that don't fail overnight. But 3 months later, the cracks appeared. International routing delays, cost overruns, warehousing congestion in high-density zones. Projected profit margins didn't align with operational realities. Analysts began questioning the scalability logic. Internal memos leaked. Investors panicked. Stock dipped, then dropped, then plummeted. By month 5, Henderson & Kohl's international expansion was labeled a strategic miscalculation. By month 6, regulatory bodies began investigating financial disclosures. Because when millions disappear, people start asking questions. Ethan called me on a Sunday. His voice was different, not confident, not relaxed, sharp. "What did you do?" I let silence sit between us. "I don't know what you're talking about. The model was flawed." I almost laughed. "You mean the one you stole?" Silence. "You knew," he said slowly. "Yes, you set us up." "No," I corrected calmly. "You set yourselves up." His breathing was heavy. "They're auditing everything. They should." "You don't understand," he said, voice lowering. "Cole is furious. He thinks I sabotaged it." "Interesting. So explain it to him." "He doesn't believe me." "Of course he doesn't, because in their world there are no allies, only leverage."
But here's what Ethan didn't know. I hadn't just sabotaged the model. I had sent an anonymous package to the regulatory board 2 months earlier. Inside it, copies of financial transfers, the recording of Cole discussing coercion, documentation proving intellectual property theft, carefully curated, legally precise, impossible to ignore. I didn't attack emotionally. I attacked structurally, the way I build everything, from the foundation up.
When news of the investigation broke publicly, Laura went pale. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "You did this," she whispered. I defended myself. "They could go to prison." "They should." Her eyes filled with tears. "You destroyed them." "No," I said quietly. "They destroyed themselves the moment they underestimated me." There was a long silence. Then she asked the question that had been hanging between us since part 1. "What happens to us?" And that was the hardest part of all. Because revenge is clean. Marriage is not. 2 days later, Ethan was arrested. Not just for corporate espionage, but for financial fraud tied to investor misrepresentation. Daniel Cole resigned pending investigation. His empire cracked. But here's the twist no one saw coming. Laura received a call from federal investigators. They wanted her cooperation, immunity in exchange for testimony. She looked at me, terrified. "You knew this would happen." "Yes." "You used me." I held her gaze. "No, I gave you a choice." She swallowed hard. "And if I testify, you might walk away free. And us?" I didn't answer immediately, because this story was never just about revenge. It was about identity, trust, power, and what remains after betrayal burns everything down. Ethan was in custody. Cole's empire was collapsing. The money trail was exposed. The humiliation that nearly broke me had transformed into control. But the final twist? It wasn't about business. It wasn't about revenge.
It was about Laura. Because in part 6, she will make a decision that shocks everyone, reveal something she never told me, and force me to confront the one truth I've been avoiding. Sometimes the closest betrayal is the one inside your own heart.
The night before Laura met with federal investigators, we didn't sleep. Not because we were arguing, not because we were crying, but because everything that had once defined us, husband, wife, loyalty, betrayal, felt suspended in air, waiting for gravity to decide where it would land. Ethan was in custody. Daniel Cole had resigned. The investigation was public. News outlets were calling it one of the largest cases of corporate manipulation in the regional logistics sector. And in the center of it all was my marriage.
Laura sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. "I never meant for it to become this," she said quietly. "That's the problem," I replied. "You never meant. You reacted." She looked up at me. "You think this was easy for me?" I didn't answer immediately, because here's the truth. For months, I had only seen her as the villain, then as the pawn, then as the weak link. But sitting there, stripped of makeup, stripped of confidence, stripped of illusion, she looked human, broken, not evil. And that made it harder.
"Did you ever plan to leave me?" I asked. She didn't hesitate this time. No. The word hit differently than I expected. Even after everything? I thought, once it was done, once the money was enough, I could fix us. Fix us. With stolen money. With security, she whispered. You were always scared of failing, of losing everything. I thought if I had something separate, something safe. You built your safety by destroying me. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't think you'd ever find out. That hurt more than the affair. Not because she cheated, but because she believed I was incapable of seeing. There's something else, she said suddenly. My chest tightened. What? She swallowed. When Ethan realized you might suspect something, he suggested accelerating phase 2. I already knew that. That's not it. Silence. Then, he wanted me to file for divorce immediately after the international launch, publicly, loudly. I stared at her. Why? To discredit you if you retaliated. The air in the room shifted. Explain. If you accused them of theft after a messy divorce, it would look like revenge, emotional instability, jealousy. I felt something cold settle into my spine. They weren't just stealing my work. They were constructing a narrative where I was the bitter husband lashing out, where corporate allegations were just personal rage. They were going to destroy me professionally, I said quietly. Yes. And you? I told him no. For the first time, I saw defiance in her eyes. I wouldn't let him ruin your name. You'd already ruined it. I know. The next morning, she left for the federal building. I didn't go with her. This was her decision. Her consequences. 3 hours later, she came back. Exhausted. Pale. They're offering limited immunity, she said, if I testify fully, if I provide access to the accounts. the messages, everything. Are you going to? She looked at me. And this was the moment, the pivot point, the final axis of the story. Yes.
Within weeks, the investigation deepened. Emails between Daniel Cole and Ethan were leaked, recorded financial promises, discussions about strategic sabotage. The audio Laura captured became central evidence. Ethan, facing multiple federal charges, attempted to negotiate. But Cole had already distanced himself, claimed ignorance, blamed rogue partnerships. Except, the documentation was airtight. And when the news finally broke that internal executives had approved covert funding strategies, Henderson and Cole's stock crashed. Board members resigned. The empire folded in on itself. The war was over.
I thought I would feel victorious, triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I felt empty. Because revenge is loud, but aftermath is quiet. Ethan was sentenced. Cole faced long-term litigation. Laura avoided prison due to cooperation. And me? I was left with a marriage standing on fractured ground.
2 months after the trial, we sat in the same kitchen where this had begun. No yelling, no accusations, just truth. "I betrayed you," she said plainly. "Yes. I hurt you. Yes. I don't expect forgiveness." I studied her carefully. "You didn't just cheat," I said. "You chose someone else's validation over our reality." "I know. You chose fear over honesty." "Yes."
You chose greed over trust. She nodded slowly. "And you?" she asked softly. The question surprised me. "What about me?" You chose work over presence, control over vulnerability. You were disappearing long before Ethan showed up. That one landed, because it was true. I had been building empires, but neglecting intimacy. Not an excuse, but context.
"I want a divorce," I said calmly. Her face tightened, but she didn't look shocked. I figured. "I don't hate you," I continued, "but I don't trust you." She nodded. "I don't trust myself either." That was honest, and honesty was something we hadn't had in a long time. "But here's the part you won't expect," I added. She looked up. "I'm not divorcing you because of Ethan." Her brow furrowed. "I'm divorcing you because I don't want to become the man who monitors his wife's phone for the rest of his life." Silence. "I don't want to win battles and lose myself." A tear slipped down her cheek. "That's fair."
A year later, my company recovered. Stronger, smarter, more cautious. Laura moved to another state. We finalized everything cleanly. No drama, no public destruction. Sometimes the closest betrayal isn't the lover, or the competitor, or the friend who shakes your hand while plotting your fall. Sometimes it's the quiet distance you ignore, the conversations you postpone, the cracks you refuse to see. Ethan was closer than I thought. Daniel Cole was more dangerous than I thought. But the real truth, the real shock, the real unexpected ending. I had been drifting away from my own marriage long before anyone else stepped into it. And that's the part that hurts the most. Jealousy made me reactive.
Humiliation made me strategic. But truth made me free. And sometimes, freedom is the only victory that matters.